Hello all my JavaScript friends, this is the Virtuoid, aka Mike Smith, and this is our Weed Wacker game. Now, this video is going to be a little bit different from all the rest of them. Usually I try to stretch these videos out over 6, 7, sometimes up to 12 different videos, highlighting different sections of the code, but this time we did something a little differently. First of all, we published the full run-through of the game, and that was published a number of days ago. Today we're going to have a full look at the code for the Weed Wacker game. So first of all, if you want to see how it's played, check out the video that I have in the link below, and it will show you how it gets played. But for now, let's take a look at the code. First of all, let's take a look at the organization of the code. It's organized a lot like I have all the rest of mine, other ones organized. It has the source code. Within the source, I have the CSS, the images, the sounds, and the JS. The CSS is very simple. This is the common one they use for every single one of my applications, and this is the Weed Wacker one that is specific for the Weed Wacker. There's nothing really whole lot to go on there. Images, there's a bunch of different images, and a lot of these are the images that we use in the game. Anything from the cutter to the grass, the different levels, the durability level, the power, the range, the spawn, the speed, the time, the different rocks that we use within the game. Of course, all of them are PNG, all the different weeds that we use in the game. And I've got room for about 9 different weeds, but we only had 7 of them published, but that's fine there. That's not a problem. JS, we'll go through this in a lot greater detail later on, but I've got it split into two different sections like I normally have, or like I've started doing actually a lot of my games. I've split everything up by an engine which has no graphics in it whatsoever, and the graphics level which has all the graphics in it, and this includes the different scenes. We are using PhaserJS, so this does include the different scenes. The index is the main driver of the program. This is the entry point for everything. And then here are the sounds: the idle sound, the rock sound, the weed cut sound, and the weeds sound. These are the different sounds that we play. The index.html is no big deal. I'm not going to worry too much about that one. What I really do want to show you before we get into it is that what I've done here is I try to put everything configurable within one file. And that's in what we call a Weed Wacker config file. So you see absolutely everything inside of here. First of all, we have all the different names of the weeds. These weed names were generated by AI. I did not do that. Here are the different symbols for all the different panels that we, or all the different statistics that we keep. Notice that score is not used. That would be something later on if you wish to add on there. Here are all the different rocks that we have. Again, AI generated all the different names for these rocks. By the way, AI, that's the only thing AI did this entire system here, was just generate this and generate that, because it came up with great names, better names than I would have come up with. And here are the different events that could possibly occur, whether the cutter is idle and it gets a certain sound, where we have the weed cutting sound where it's cutting the weed. We have the weed cut where it has a little boop sound when it cuts the weed. And we have the rock hit when it hits the rock. I have also, because I like to have uppercase variables to be constants or to be exported, I have set uppercase symbols or uppercase constants to equate to some of the symbols that I have internally here inside Weed Wacker config, so that they're very obvious that they are not variables, but they are symbols within the main programs. You do not have to do this. This is just for sugar candy. It has really no effect on anything whatsoever. Here are the different rocks that we have here. Basically, I'll go through this very briefly here. The different types, everything is indexed by the symbols. That allows me to be able, as you'll see here shortly, this allows me to be able to index everything based upon, or access everything based upon symbols. We got a name for it here. The toughness in this case is how many damage points it deals to the cutter when the cutter hits it. So if you ever get an iron vein one, which is the 5th level of rock, you're going to get its damage of 7. And remember, we're talking about once every 15 milliseconds or so, you're going to get the update. So that 7 is going to kill you really, really quick. You just want to keep away from that. Rock types just allows me to index the types very quickly. Here are all the different weeds. As you can see here, I did have room for, well, it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's 10 different weeds, but I only programmed for 7. The toughness is how tough it is for the weed. So as we cut the weed. This tells you how many basically hit points you have for the weed. Points is something that you would get if we kept score. We do not keep score. And here's the images that are used for the different weeds. Weed type statistics, here are all the different statistics. You can see score is not kept here. This is the starting value for each stat. So this is the default value. So we're going to start at 15,000 milliseconds or 15 seconds. We're going to start the power at 5, which means every time the update occurs, we'll have the power of 5 subtract from this number right here for the weeds. That's how we determine how quickly the weeds get cut down. Speed is how fast we're moving the Weed Wacker around. Range is how big the Weed Wacker is. Once you upgrade the range, the Weed Wacker gets bigger and bigger, so you can cut down more weeds. That also means you can probably have a tendency to hit more rocks too. So that could be a problem, just FYI, but that's the way it is. Durability is the number of your hit points, so that as you accidentally hit a rock, this is the number that's going to come off of that durability every update cycle. So you could take a couple of hits from the basal tusk and maybe 1 or 2 from the crag mantle, but once you start getting to the 3, the 5, and the 7, it'll cut you down really, really quick, and the game will be over with. Here's the index for all the different sounds. Here are the index for the different levels. Now, what the levels basically means is this is the when you get an upgrade, you can upgrade your time, and these are all the different how a time is upgraded. How you upgrade time. And each one of these has a certain pattern to them. They have a text, they have an adjustment, and how much it costs. And this how much it costs is what appears on the screen within the game when you have the little cards up there that display the level. It will show the different weeds on there and how many there are. But because we're able to get all of these different levels to be exactly the same, we can use the same routine to be able to figure out what the adjustments are going to be. Speed, same way. Range is the same way. Durability is the same way. Each one of them also has an active fill and a highlight fill. This is basically the color we're going to fill in the cards. Notice each one of these cards would have a different color, and they get filled. And as you hover over them, if they're active, that's what the highlight fill is all about. And this gives you what different graphics it is and what the key is. And that key is very important. That gets tied into the level so we know what to update. Spawn rate is how fast the flowers will actually spawn, and you'll see code for that here shortly. Rock generation is the number of rocks that get generated per round. At the very beginning, the very first round, we don't generate any rocks. The second round, we don't generate any rocks. The third round, we don't generate any rocks. The fourth round, we finally all are these really simple rocks, as is the fifth round. It's not until the sixth round till we start getting some of the harder rocks, and then it gets harder and harder and harder and harder. And once you get to the final round here, it will then just reuse this last one over and over and over again. And the same thing with the weed generation. Weed generation for each individual level, we have the number of weeds we're going to put in there to start with, and then plus what the distribution of those weeds are going to be like. So the very first time we only get the level 1 weeds, and we start off with 5. We start off with 7 on the second level, and 90% of the time we get the first level weed, and 10% of the time we get the second level weed, and so on and so forth. They're level 9, and then as you can see here, we start increasing the number of weeds that we can get all the way down to this very last one down here, which we have the percentages. You can get pretty much everything there. And when we match, and when we finally get up to the final level, if it goes past this level, we just stick at this number right here constantly. And then, of course, here's where we always export it. But I've spent a lot of time on this weed config because this is very important. Everything within this system is configurable, and that's very, very important. Without the configuration, we're kind of stunk. All right, so what we're going to do here is I'm going to go to 2 different pieces of it. I'm going to first take a look at the engine part of it, and then and the graphics that are associated with it. Then I'm going to go into the PhaserJS section of it, and these are all pretty much follow the same routines. Let's take a look first of all at the panel, and the panel is very easy. This is the panel that shows up on the left hand side that contains the statistics, the 3 buttons, the level up button, the continue button, and the new game button, and the number of weeds that you have cut down. This is a state that allows us to be able to tell the buttons which buttons are going to be disabled and which buttons are going to be enabled. And a lot of these classes follow the same routines. We get all, in this case, we're going to get all our statistics, we get all the stats, we get all the different weeds, we get the panel UI. This initiates the panel UI on all of these routines here. It is responsible for the UI system, so it will go into the panel UI and initiate the UI part of the panel. And this is what actually does all the drawing itself. We'll go through that in a second. And then we just get starts and starts. We get the big thing here is the set stat and adjust stat, which allows us to set and adjust the stat. The big thing here is that every time we set a stat or adjust a stat, we call the panel UI and say, hey, you need to update that stat, so that stat gets updated on the panel. Same thing with the weeds here. When we adjust or set the weeds, we also have to update the weed on the panel UI. This is the reset that basically goes into the panel and says, hey, we're going to reset everything. It's back to the defaults. And where do we get those defaults? We get those defaults back from the configuration file. And then time is the only special one here. Usually we keep the steps differently, but time is a little bit different since that one's dependent upon the game itself. We get the stat values, the weed inventory. I'm not really worried about that kind of stuff. This is what happens when we click on the new games or on the continue games or on the set state. I'm sorry, on the new level up, the new game and the continue game. And we don't know that happens until we get to the graphics part itself. And that graphics part is here in this section. And this is very, very simple. In the constructor, all we do here is we grab all the different stats and we physically build the different span, the different LI, the ULLI for the different stats. We then build the entire weed list. And then we take a look at every single one of those action buttons, the level up button, the continue button, and the new game button. Pop those in there, and then pop in the 3 event listeners on there. Set the scenes. This is very important that we know what scenes are available to us. So the set scenes allows us to be able to communicate back with the main program, or at least know when the main program is getting scenes from the PhaserJS. And by the way, I forgot to tell you that when we do set the constructor, we do know what the game is looking like and what the parent is looking like, and from there we can get the scenes. So that's not, as you can see here, this.game, we can get that scene information. When we update the stat, this is where we physically update the stat. And a lot of this code is just to make sure it doesn't go really wonky-fied on there, where I don't get like a 2.9999997. It will limit itself to 4 characters, basically. Update weeds, again, we just update the count, the text count. This set state is what we do to be able to determine that depending upon what state we are currently in, then we either enable or disable the different buttons depending upon the situation. This is what happens when we click on new game, level up, or continue. We just pass it on to the parent saying, hey, you got to do a new game, you got to do a level up or continue game. And that's all there is to the panel. That's really not much of a big deal there. Rock and weed are going to basically be the exact same thing for kind of, and I'll show you that here in just a second. Let's go to the weed itself. Now the weeds are what appears not only inside the panel itself, but the weeds also appear on the screen randomly, and that's what gets cut down. And it's very easy here. These 3 I just realized I don't use at all. This is things I thought I would use, but I actually didn't use it at all. When we do a constructor here, we pass data to it, and when we set the data, we set the data from the config. But I want you to notice something very important here. We get the data from the config file, but we make copies of it. And the reason we make copies of it, that is because we don't want to destroy the original config file. Now, technically, we are reading it from a JSON file, but once it gets into memory, we don't want to change anything in there. Remember, JavaScript passes objects by reference. It doesn't pass it by value. So one object with the same property and the same value does not equal another object with the same property and same value. So I'm doing all of this to make absolutely certain that I'm working on copies. That makes the resetting and everything like that a whole lot easier. And we, getting the toughest, getting the type, getting the sprite, getting the name. Adjusting the toughest is very easy, because once we hit the weed, we need to be able to adjust the toughness. And when we do that, we got to do 2 things. We got to update the health bar, which I'll show you here in just a second, and then we also have to destroy the weed once the toughness gets down to 0 or below. And basically that's all it is. The real important thing here, as we'll show you when we get to the index, is that when we construct this, we're going to I'm sorry, take that back. I made a mistake there. When we do a create for the weed, when the weed gets created, we're going to add it to what we call a physics group. And that physics group is going to add this particular weed to a group that is internally it's internally kept by PhaserJS that will allow it to then be able to determine collisions with the cutter, and that's very, very important. And that's what this create does. And again, I'll show you that here shortly. And then, of course, Weed.js is very, very simple. This creates the health bar, which is extremely simple. The health bar basically is two different rectangles. The first part of the rectangle is all green, and the second part of the rectangle is all black. And I actually stole this from my what was that game? What did I call that game? Hold That Tower. I stole this from the Hold the Tower game. So I thought it worked really well with those guys, and so I thought, yeah, okay, I'll use that one too. So I just stole this. The only thing I did is I added this black rectangle here, or this black bar here that fills up the rest of the 100%. So as the green disappears, the black will appear, and of course destroys the weed itself, and the update health bar will allow us to update the health bar itself. That's pretty much it. There's not a whole lot to the weed on its own. All right, let's take a look now at the rock. Rock is even simpler than that. It just basically appears and adjusts the toughness. It has the same create function that the weed does, in which we add it to a particular physics group, because the weeds have their physics group, the rock has their physics group. Each one of them will communicate with the cutter through PhaserJS. The rock AI is that's it. There's really not a whole lot there. It's just, that's it. There's really not a whole lot to the rock. It's really very, very simple. Alrighty, let's take a look now at that was the weed, that was the rock, the whacker. Our little weed whacker, our weed eliminator. Let's take a look at that next. Very, very simple. The idea here is that we do have something with the durability, and get weeds cut. This is something I thought I was going to use. Obviously, I did not use it. We get to adjust the speed if we need to. That's going to be very simple. We can adjust the durability. We can adjust the range. We can add a weed. A lot of this information that I put in here that I really don't need. Again, it's one of those things that may be necessary if you're going to keep score. The only really thing about the whacker is that we also have to set the position and adjust the speed. The weed, I'm sorry, and that's pretty much it for that particular one. Why is there no UI? Well, the reason there's no UI is because there's no need to have a UI in this case. It's all exactly the same. So the index.js controls the UI in this particular case, which, thinking about it now, is probably something I need to change. But I'll leave it up to you to change that, because remember, everything is free here. And I forgot to say that. Remember, everything you can get from Fun with JavaScript -public from the Virtuoid GitHub account. It's public. It is free. And not only do you get Weed Wacker, but you get all these other games that we've done here in the past year and a half. Now, that takes care of the files that we take a look at. Now, PhaserJS has its own scenes, and there's 3 different scenes that are associated with this. What I call the start scene, what I call the yard scene, and what I call the level up scene. Let's take a look at the start scene first. The start scene, its entire purpose in life is to do absolutely nothing but really preload all the different images. And that's really simple here. Is I just load up the grass, I load up the cutters, then I load up all the weeds, load up all the rocks, load up all the levels, load up all the sounds. That's it. And then when I create it, I create the grass, in this case the background grass, and then I create the text that says Weed Wacker in the smack dab in the middle. And this is basically what you see when you first bring it up, and that's it. It doesn't do anything else, so we're not going to spend any more time on that. All right, then the big thing here is on the, let's take a look at the level up. Now this occurs when you click on level up and you get the 6 cards that appear there. So this was just a little bit more complicated. So we'll just kind of go through it here real quick. I'm not going to worry about anything like that. The big thing here is what's going to happen with the create. With the create here is I've got all this information within the screen itself, and I need to be able to figure out how can I fit all 6 of these cards in here. And a lot of this code right here is just trying to figure out how to fit all those to fit all those cards. And once we get that information, we then do a simple little for each on all the different levels. And this levels is read in from that that Weed Wacker config file that we saw at the very beginning. And so this draw box is the big kahuna. That's what actually runs everything. All of this code allows me to basically figure out where is it going to be positioned. It's going to, first of all, when it builds the box, it's going to build the box. It's going to add in the background box. It's going to add in the box itself. It's going to add in the title text, the image that's being used in the box, the upgrade text. And then it's going to set the box name based upon the key, and that's going, again, coming in from the levels. And it's going to, if we can upgrade it, then we're going to put an on event for pointer over, pointer out, and pointer down. For pointer over, we change the background color to a highlight color. For pointer out, we take that color off, and pointer down, we go do something. I'll show you that here in just a simple second. So let's go back now to build box. That's what was done here with, let me just take that, there we go. So let's take a look at build box first. So we can pass all that information to build box. That then allows us to actually physically build the box itself. So we just go back through here, and if we can upgrade it, then we do a whole bunch of really funky looking stuff here to figure out what the new text is going to be like, what the new level is going to be like. Because whenever we do the upgrade on the cards, we always say, increases level by 20%, and in parentheses we'll put in what the old value is and what it will go to the new value. So that's what all of this is trying to figure out, is what the old value and the new value is going to be. Then we set the images and the data where they happen to be, what the text is going to be. We set the name, we push all that information, and then save it off. Unless we can't upgrade it anymore, then we always put max level. And once we've done all of that, then we return all that information. And once we return all that information, here's something that's very important, is that there it is, build box. Once we return all the information, we're going to add to the container all of that information that we grabbed in that came back from the build box. And the idea here is grabbing all that information and saving it in the container. That allows us to access it later for when we have to update the box. Why would we need to update the box? Update's up here. Why would we have to update? I did an update box there. Let's try that again. Okay, my mistake. After we build the box, we're going to set the Yeah, I made a mistake there. After we build the box, we're going to set the data right there in the box, and that's going to be important so that when we click on the box or anything like that, we have all the information we need in the box to be able to do whatever we have to do. So that's going to be extremely important. We need to know what data is associated with that box, and that set data gives us that ability really, really easy. So thank you, PhaserJS, for thinking about that. Now, on to the update boxes, which is what we should have done to begin with there. The update boxes are very, very simple. What happens on the update box is, let's say you click on one of the boxes that takes 4 of the level 1 weeds and one of the level 2 weeds. What will happen is that the system will go into the panel and say, okay, subtract that information out, and then the panel will report back, say, here's my new data list, or here's my new number of weeds that we have left. And where you may have been able to upgrade, let's say, the speed, but now after you clicking on, upgrading the durability, now you can't upgrade the speed anymore. So we need to update all those different boxes because it may have been turned off, for example, where you can't access it anymore. And that's all update boxes does. It is very, very simple. And if we can't upgrade anymore, we turn off the pointers. That's the real big thing here, is that if we can't upgrade anymore, we got to turn off the pointers. And that's really all this text does more than anything. Let's take a look. See, build box. I want to take a look at the pointer overs, the pointer outs, and the pointer down. Pointer over, all we're doing is just changing the highlight filter. That's it. We're doing absolutely nothing else. Pointer out, we're changing the highlight filter back to active fill. We're not doing anything else. That's it. The key here is, notice all these say is get data. And the idea here is that when we're getting data from this argument, that's that data that we set way back up here. So as you can tell, that's why it's so important to be able to put that information in there so that we know what that data is when we get to these routines. The pointer down one's the really biggie here. The pointer down is very, very easy. No big deal. First of all, We set the default cursor. What we want to do here more than anything is that we want to be able to shift out the target levels, because we know that we can purchase this one. So we do whatever we have to do to purchase it, to get the information. We shift the target levels. And what is important about that is that once we shift these levels, when we try to re-update this box up here in the update boxes, if there are no more levels left within those boxes, then we will end up having to put out a max level, which actually is inside build box. Of course, build box is also called from update boxes. But the key here is that if there are no more levels to be able to update, that's where we put, max level, and we can't do anything past that point. So that's very important right there. But the key here is that we send a game event called onLevelUp, and this will send an event back to the main game saying, we've got to level up, do what you need to do. And the compare inventory is very simple. That just allows us to be able to determine very quickly whether we have the inventory or don't have the inventory to activate the card or not. So that's really all there is to the level up. The yard is also relatively simple, but not simple, but relatively complicated. When we construct the games, no big deal. Weed list is very important because we got to get to the weed list. Now, the yard itself is the physical yard in the green yard that you see, that where all the weeds and everything pop up. All right, on the create part, it's very simple. The idea here is that we need to start listening to events. Everything is event driven as much as possible. And when a weed gets destroyed, we need to know when it gets destroyed. And so we're going to listen to when that weed gets destroyed by using this events. We're also going to do a shutdown event here. This will allow us to help clean things up later on. Don't worry about that kind of stuff. This is where we set the grass in the background. This is where we set the cutter. Remember I said originally the cutter probably should have been done within a Wacker UI, but we didn't do that. It's controlled here because there's really nothing to the cutter. It's got a certain size, and that's about it. This is where we keep track of all the different weeds and rocks. This is where we add the physics group for the weeds. It's where we add the physics groups for the weeds, and we add the initial number of weeds from the start count. That we get the start count from our current panel level. The panel is what determines our level, and so therefore we get that count from the panel level itself. Once we start getting the count, we create a new weed. And we create we initiate a new weed, and then we create the weed, setting it to physics weeds, and that will put the weeds within this physics weeds physics group, because that allows us then to be able to do this. And this basically says that fire off this on-cut weed whenever this .cutter and this .physics weeds intersect. So this .cutter is a single instance, but this .physics weeds is an array. So it's going to go through that each one of those ones array and say, do these two particular things overlap? And if they do, it's going to call onCut weed. We do the same thing with rocks. Notice we don't have any initial rocks because in the beginning game there are no initial rocks, but that's not a big deal. Here's our countdown. If you remember correctly, the system will count down automatically, 3, 2, 1 before you get going. This is where I set up the times up text. This is where I set up the games up text. This is where I set up all the different sounds. No big deal there. This is the resize event, which is not used at this particular point in time, but again, I'll leave that for you later. Here's the update. This is the real thing. This is the update routine in PhaserJS that is called once every approximately 14 to 20 milliseconds. That seems to be the timing that I was looking at. And so the idea here is that if our countdown is greater than 0, we process the countdown, which allows us to do the 3, 2, 1. So yes, so if we go to process countdown, process countdown, you can see out here we're just doing 3, 2, 1, and then once the process countdown goes to less than or equal to 0, we then play the sound cutter idle sound and put it in a complete loop, and that song will that sound will play all the time until we're done with it. So that takes care of that. All right, if our durability, we get panel that controls all of our different stats, and if our durability is less than or equal to 0, we've died. So we stop all of our sounds, and we put the game over text up there and we pause the game. You can't do anything but at that point except for having to only be able to click on the new game button, which is why we do the set state for panel set state game over. That allows us to disable the level up, disable the continue, but enable the new game. All right, so we know that we survived. We know the countdown is available. We're past the countdown. So then time remaining is minus delta. We adjust the time on the panel, because the panel is also keeping the time. And if the time remaining is less than or equal to 0, we stop all the sounds again and we do the times up and we hit the pause and we give it the panel the times up state, which will activate all 3 buttons, because you can always click on new game at the very end and just erase what you've been doing. You can click and continue to do the next game, the next level, or you can click on level up to bring up the level up. Finally, if everything is still going fine, we make sure the countdown text has been kicked to false, because we don't need it anymore. This is where we get the gamepad information, and this gamepad information allows us to not only get the speed but the angle that we're moving the cutter at. The set velocity is very important because that also gets the stat speed. This allows us to be able to use the speed number to figure out, how fast are we actually going. Our base speed is 200, and then the speed will increase. In fact, let me just bring up the config here. And if we go up to speed, there it is, speed. Our first adjustment goes up by 20%, our next one by 30%, next one by 40%. So that will then allow us to be able to say 200 times whatever that percentage is. And then the y-axis is also 200 times whatever that percentage is. So that's how you can increase the speed each and every single time. So that's all this part does, is just do the gamepad. All right, then if the spawn delta is a number that tells us when we're going to spawn the weeds, and that gets adjusted by the spawn rate. So basically it's once every 2,000 milliseconds or once every 2 seconds, but that changes with the spawn rate. When that happens, all we have to do is we get that distribution number from our current round. Again, this is from the configuration file. We get the weed from the distribution. That allows us to get weed from distribution is very simple. We take that distribution, which we have, that's the rock. We take the distribution that we have right here. Let's get one that has some numbers in it. We take the distribution it has right here. We do a random number, and we figure out from that distribution which weed we're going to distribute. And so that's how we get. That's where we get this. Whoops, that's rock. That's how we get this. Get weed from distribution. So just like we did with the other one, we create the new weed. We add it to our physics weeds physical group. We push the weeds and we put the spawn delta back to 0, and that spawn delta allows us to be able to again just try to figure out when we get a spawn rate. The rock spawn rate does the exact same thing, but this is a little bit more interesting, and it gets rock distribution, and this part works the exact same way as the other one did, the weed does. But the interesting thing here is that this is once it gets active, it goes once every 4,000 milliseconds, and then it increases by 50 milliseconds times the round that we are at. So basically we will do 50 times the round minus 2. So that's when we basically start at round 3, or round 4, since we start at 0. But as you get higher and higher in the rounds, those rocks are going to pop all over the place faster and faster and faster until they're just flying out the door. So I've set up this game where it's almost literally going to be impossible to play forever. You will eventually die, because eventually you can't upgrade your durability and you will hit a rock eventually. But that's all this section does here too. It's just do the rock spawn delta. Found rock, rocks for each. If we have found a rock, now what is find rock? Well, found rock, basically this allows us right here to be able to determine whether we are overlapping our cutter and a particular rock. The physics group up here will take care of, the physics group that we have up here will take care of internally whether we are hitting the rock. But what I wanted to do here is that when we're hitting the rock, I have an indicator sound-wise. It goes when we do the rock, when we hit the rock, but I want some sort of visual indicator. So that's what this section does too, is that we do clear a tint. Well, actually, the big thing here is that, yeah. So basically, we set a tint on this rock when this tint is being hit. And I'm trying to find where that tint. Oh, that's right. The tint is down here. We'll get to that in just a second. So basically, that's what all this section does here is it figures out, it clears out the tint. It also figures out whether we can start or stop a rock from doing the type deal. So earlier I said that we when the rocks get hit. Where was it? There we go. When the weed gets hit, we do on cut weed. When rocks get hit, we do on hit rock. We are now at those routines. So on hit rock is very, very simple. Where we're hitting the rock, we just try to figure out what rock gets hit. We start playing the root. We set that tint up to that reddish number, that reddish glow, so that red comes up here. And then we send the game events a hit rock event with the rock's toughness. This is what's going to subtract the durability number. This is what's going to eventually subtract the durability number, which we'll see here in just a second. Exact same thing for the cut weed, except we're cutting the weeds in differently. We play its little routine, its little, type sound when it does that, and then we adjust the weed's toughness, which will then spin the message for the weed toughness. On Weed Destroyed allows us to be able to know when a weed has been destroyed. How do we know when weed gets destroyed? Well, we did that way at the very top of the create, so we set up ourselves a little event saying, hey, this weed got destroyed. And that's all that really is. We just stop the sounds. We play the weed cut sound, and then we go tell the game that, hey, you've got a weed got cut, kill it. All right, process countdown is real simple. We've already went through that. Get weed distributions, we got that, and that's it for the yard. That's all the yard does. So we've gotten all the preliminaries out of the way. Let's take a quick look at, and it's going to be a quick look because it's not that a whole lot there. Let's look at the index file itself and show you how all of this gets tied in. Well, this config file is our configuration file for PhaserJS. As you can tell, it's very, very simple. We've got a width and a height of 100%. We've got an arcade there. We've defined the physics for the arcade. We're told it where it's going to be located on the HTML. No big deal there. This is the code that we do for what happens when we get a new game. What happens when we get a new game? Well, we set the panel, which sets up back all the defaults. With the scene level up, we reset the scene itself to the level up scene, so it knows that, hey, all the cards have been changed. We set the round to the round itself, and then we call continue game. So all of this right here allows us to be able to basically set all of our numbers back down to the defaults before we set continue game. Because basically a new game and continue game are the exact same thing, except that new game resets the defaults. So what happens on continue game? Well, we get we set the state in the round, saying, hey, we now got a round here. We stop the scene for the start. We stop the level up scene, and then we get we set the inventories, and we tell the level up that here's your inventory, and we get the panel values, and we tell the level up these are your panel values, and then we tell the yard those are your panel values. Oh, and by the way, continue the game from there. So then the yard can take the current values of everything we've got and then use those to be able to continue the game. It's really, really simple there. When they click on level up, what happens? Well, we set the state for level up. We stop the start. We stop the start scene. We stop the yard scene. We get the inventory and set the inventory up on to level up for both the inventory and the panel values, and then we tell the level up to start, and that will then display the level up. The key here is, both here and in the continue, is that level up needs to know what the current inventory for the current inventory for the weeds and the current statistics are, and all of that information can be gotten from the panel. The panel is basically what keeps all of our statistics, and that was the level up. Yeah, on level up is what happens when we actually click on level up, so it's basically no big deal there. We kind of covered all that. Here's the interesting part, which I'm not very happy with, but this seems to be the only thing that works. This is where we store this. This is where we start the game itself. Actually, let's go to that here just a second. Here's the new game. Here's where we add the 3 different scenes. Here's where if we get a change weed count, this is where we tell the panel, hey, you need to adjust the weeds. If we get a hit rock, we tell the panel, hey, you need to adjust the durability. We control the new panel. Here's where we listen to the on select new game, on select level up, on select continue game, and on level up. The on new game, on level up, and continue game is the button clicks. The on level up does the level up. Here's where we load our specialized funky 80s looking font. When it is finished, we do the start game. The start game comes up here and then does the yard panel, sets the scenes, sets the state, and then tells the scene to start. The scene start is what's going to load up all your data. And the only thing that was really weird about all this is that without this little particular piece of code here, all of the data was blank. Scene yard, level up, and start scene. I had to add this in to be able to get the correct objects after they've been created. I don't know why that happened, but that's just what I had to do. That took me a little bit of time to figure out. I was a little irritated at it, but that's the way it is. But that's basically all there is to it. It's actually a relatively simple game. The idea here is that index is what controls everything. All of these little events is what controls everything that you see here. And then most of them get sent off to the panel because the panel is what keeps all our statistics. And the panel then sends events back to everybody saying, hey, things have changed. You need to go do something with it. And then everybody else does something with it at that point, especially the level up section, where all the data is passed into the level up so we know how we level up. But that's basically all there is to the Weed Wacker game. In this case, I know it's a long video, but that's the entire game. Again, this is free code. If you go to the Fun with JavaScript public GitHub site or GitHub repository on the VirtualVoid account, and I've got a link for it below in the description, you can get all this code and all of our different games completely free of charge for you to do with whatever you want. You can do it's completely free of charge. So thank you very much for listening to this this long video. Instead of splitting up over 6 videos, I just did it in one. But thank you very much for listening to it. I really appreciate it. Happy coding. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to this channel to view more videos. Click on the like button on this video and visit us at virtualvoid.com. Also, support us on Patreon, where you can get access to member-only videos. Links are down below. Again, thank you very much for watching, and keep on coding.